Alright, so back to this. Yet another Omori video. Surprisingly though, not an Omori video. I got the last videos of that done and all uploaded, right? To include the mod predictions and then or expectations and predictions video, right? And then again, but that kind of capping off the Omori videos. But still an Omori video, right? That I'm making this one. Again, this, I keep saying it'll be the last. Honestly, I'll probably keep making Omori videos until I end up playing through the true route. Again, come like about winter. That should be about that time when I'll actually be able to do that. But again, beyond that, that's something to where it's like, yeah, so I'll just keep making these videos. Pretty much done with, I'm wrapped up with the Little Witch Academia videos, the Kakiguri videos, the Violet Evergarden videos. I kind of finished all of those, right? So I'm done with the anime. I haven't actually started the next one yet, which, again, what was that? God, I don't even remember. I think it was, like, Ghost in the Shell or something, but I do plan on starting that tomorrow, right? And I kind of got everything else out of the way, so I'll be able to get through a decent amount of it tomorrow. Maybe, like, the first 6 episodes of Season 1, so we'll see, at least in terms of that. But again, for that, beyond that, just, or besides that, it seems like these Omori videos are going to keep persisting, and again, this is just another one of them, right? And again, this one's also, it's also an interesting one. I only just got the idea for this one, and it's also one that, again, partially I'm doing it just, again, to buy time, because I have something later today that, again, right, just have nothing to do until then. But also, again, this is something that, what would you call it? It's relating Omori to another topic that I've covered a lot, right? And that being indie, and then indie horror more specifically. Starting pretty much with Security Breach way back when I played that, and then kind of that's what spawned, or I guess started the black screen videos there. So again, right, besides being yet another Omori video, and kind of, again, one just that I just thought about, right, doing, it also kind of connects it, again, right, or bridges, no, not really bridges, but again, it connects it to another topic that I've talked about quite frequently, and again, that being indie horror, right, and the indie genre more in general, as I never really looked at Omori as that, or in that, context. It was always, as a standalone game, so, because, I mean, that's how I think you should view most games, right? If it's a good game, like, and again, this was my issue with a lot of, like, anime criticism. If it's a good show and if you enjoy it, is that not the goal, right? Like, I feel like people get bogged down in, like, comparisons and stuff like that, as opposed to looking at, again, things, like, on their own, right? Or as, like, again, or things independently of anything else. But, again, that's a bit of a, I guess, what would you call it? That's a bit of a side topic, right? Or that's a bit of a, what would you call it? That's a bit of a off topic, right? A bit of a sidetracking there. But again, it's something to where it's like, in terms of this and Omori, right? I don't even know what I'm going to tell this specifically. I think it'll be something about, like, it'll be like Omori and indie horror, or Omori and the indie horror genre or something, right? It'll be something along the lines of Omori and indie horror, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, again, kind of Omori, because it's technically indie horror, but the goal and purpose of the game isn't, again, to scare you, right? That's by far, if that's what you got out of the game, then I think you missed, like, a point or something, right? But again, that's by far, from what the game, like, you're supposed to feel from the game. So it's something to work in. But still, it's technically indie horror. I mean, the first tag, psychological horror, but also the first tag for DDLC is also psychological horror. So I'm not going to talk about that as much. I mean, I'm not even going to. It's not the beta title. I just brought that up. But again, this is going to be about specifically Omori and indie horror, right? And kind of like, again, taking a step back and kind of what it means for that, right? As well as what indie horror is in general, right? Even out of all the indie videos I made, and FNAF ones, I don't actually think I made just one specifically on indie horror, so. But again, right, with that and all that out of the way, I think we can get into it. So, like I mentioned, and just to start off with, the point of Omori isn't to scare you, right? I feel like I see some videos on YouTube, kind of like, I think people are misguided and they misinterpret, like, kind of how people view Omori about forgiveness, even though it's not. it's more so about coming to terms with reality, or more so coming to terms and accepting what has happened, regardless of if you'll be forgiven. And it's a similar here. Like, I've seen videos on, like, oh, how Omori scares you, or, oh, like, Omori is like a psychological horror game. The point of it isn't to scare you, right? I mean, there's scary portions, I guess you could call it. But again, even then, it's like very like mild. Like, it's something to where it's like, it's not the point of the game. And I mean, if you're paying attention to the story, right, which again, even through not just fucking the dream world, but especially the real world, right, and what's going on with that, and kind of filling in the gaps, piecing things together, again, right, that's not what you should be feeling. Like, I don't think there was a single point during my playthrough of Omori where I was like I don't want to say not genuinely scared, but more so where scared was like scariness was the primary thing I was feeling, right? I guess, which is a way to put it. And kind of what my argument here and what I'm trying to say is that that's more a supplementary factor as opposed to anything. And it's more so used, again, to further the story with, more specifically, again, what Sunny's feeling. That's the big thing there. Like, the scary and horror aspect of the game, I guess if you can call it that, and within at least for this game specifically, is more so supplementary and is more so done to show you how Sunny is feeling, as opposed to just trying to, like, actually get you, right? It's like, oh, gotcha, you got us scared there, right? So there's that. I think that's something to where people are misinterpreting that, but it's also something to where, again, it's similar to the whole forgiveness thing. It's not about forgiveness or scariness. It's about coming to terms and accepting what's happened, regardless of whether you'll be forgiven, and, again, portraying that scariness as, like, what's the term that I used earlier? Or again, right? Again, portraying that scariness as what Sunny is feeling and going through, not just trying to actually scare you, right? Like, for example, right? I mentioned security breach. Let's bring it back to FNAF, right? Like, the point of FNAF is to scare you. Like, I mean, let's be real here, right? Like, again, that's kind of like from the first to even the most recent game, right? That's kind of what it's about. Like, you can get into the fucking lore, but the issue being most of the lore is hidden. So by the time you actually fucking get to that point, you're like searching through, basically the game. And there's however many fucking books out now. So, but again, the main point and the main appeal of that game, again, right? In the series, I guess, and all the fan games that spun off. Like, again, Juniors just came out like a fucking few days ago. And it's already gone through like 2 or 3 updates, so I don't know, what's going on with that, but I'll need to play it at some point. And then maybe I'll make a fucking review on it. That's actually not too bad of an idea. I'll play Juniors and make a review on it at some point. But again, right? Let's see if my skills can get me through it. I beat Security Breach on a shitty laptop. I should be able to make it through that, right? But again, moving on. But the point of that is to scare you, right? And, I mean, obviously they have the jump scares. But it's also about, again, like, I guess if you want to take, like, a fucking, what's the term, right? If you want to have, like, a snobby approach, be like, oh, it's about the horror, the terror, the atmosphere and environment that the game creates. That, honestly, I don't want to call it out as complete bullshit, as it does, again, make a difference, but it's mostly, again, in bridging that between the, like, again, the actual, like, jump scare, like, what ends up getting you in the end, right? So it's more so about how it leads up and builds into as opposed to in and of itself, which some people seem to think and believe, but it's just, I feel like, again, that's more so my issue with indie in general, and people who, like, mainly play indie games being snobs, but that's game besides the point. But again, it's important to note that distinction and draw that divide, as though even though Omori is technically an indie horror game, that's not really the main purpose. And it's the same thing again, and I brought up FNAF, where, again, because it's, I guess, the quintessential, kind of like indie horror game that came out and kind of spawned and, like, really caused it to blow up. Again, it's something there to where it's like, yeah, again, obviously, like, there's a clear, distinct, like, drawn out difference there. But what I guess people would argue for FNAF, if you go that route, is that it's more so about, the horror and terror aspect. Again, right, I mean, indie horror, the, like, terror aspect and kind of the environment, and then, like, ambiance, and then, what's it called, like, atmosphere that creates, and that leading into whatever jump scare that ends up getting you in the end, right? But the main point is that for both of them, right, neither of them are about that outright, again, like sort of like jump scare, like that gets you, right? Both are Omori as supplementary, again, that horror being supplementary there, more so for how Sunny's feeling. And then I guess even in FNAF, right, that's the one that I can probably relate to most, because that's the one I played the most. I played, what, nearly every single game, excluding, what's it called, I didn't play UCN or FNAF 4, I didn't even play that. Or VR, because I didn't have fucking VR headsets, so that doesn't count. But again, right, besides that, it's something to where it's like that, it's not really about the jump scare itself, again, supposedly. People say it's solely about, the atmosphere and the environment. I say it's that leading into the jump scare, kind of, again, bridging the gap there, building into that, because if there's no execution, that's like, okay, then it's like, you just adapt, you acclimate, right? It's like, it's just, like, it's like sitting in a dark room. Again, you kind of adapt there. But moving forward, it's something where it's like, neither of which is horror the main quintessential, like, point, right? It's always either, supplementary or something that's built into, right? It's never in and of itself. And I think that's something to where I don't think, again, out of all the indie video, like, black screen videos I made, right? I don't think I ever really, like, outright stated or I talked about that as, again, right, I talked about indie horror, the indie genre a lot, how much, like, disdain I have for it, but I don't think I ever really talked about what it means, indie horror means in and of itself, and specifically, again, right, as applied to these games, FNAF and Omori, right? FNAF is kind of the quintessential, like, indie horror series, and then Omori, again, is this more recent, but also, again, probably as far away from a horror game as you can get while still being classified as a horror game. But again, horror in that instance being supplementary versus in FNAF, where it's like kind of built into there, if that makes sense. So again, right, there's that. So a good example of it, and again, I guess I can bring up a good example for both, right? So for Omori, a good example of the horror aspect there would be your fights, probably the main and primary example would be your fights against something, right? Like all the something battles, I think there's like 3 of them, 3 total that you get in the real world. Because again, most of them occur in the real world unless you go to the Lost Library, then you can refight them there. But the 3 something fights, that's, a primary, main example, right? It's horror, again, being supplementary towards showing, again, what Sunny is going through, right? Because, like, obviously, you get the fucking, intro, and then so the first one, I'm pretty sure you fight on the stairs, and it's, there's a term for it, right? Or it's acrophobia, I think, because, again, they each have a name for, like, the fear, and that's, like, the fear of heights, I think. Or not fear of heights, it's fear of, is it actually fear of heights? I have no idea. But, again, I think the first fight's acrophobia, and it's the one on the stairs, and it's the one with all the hands, like, okay, it's a scary picture, right? But, I mean, you're fighting it in an RPG setting. Like, let's be real here, There's no real, like, scary factor there. It's just a PNG moving on your screen. Let's be real, right? There's no, again, but it is, and what it does do, right, is present that horror aspect as, again, more supplementary for how Sunny's feeling. As he starts afraid, goes through the fight, learns to calm down, learns to focus, learns to, again, breathe, right? Again, and then he goes through and overcomes that, right? And that's, again, an excellent use of that there. Again, it tells, it shows what Sunny goes through, right? It's not a text box saying Sunny feels scared. You see the fight, you play through the fight, and again, that horror aspect is more supplementary and being used, again, for Sunny there in that aspect. So that's probably, and you've got the other 2, right? I believe it's arachnophobia, that one's the spider one. And then you've got thalassophobia, which is the water one. That one's drowning, I think. That one you find in the lake. But again, right? Those are excellent examples of horror being used as supplementary sort of aspects, again, towards, to show really how Sunny's feeling and what he's going through. And, I mean, again, doesn't mean you can't get scared by it, but the point isn't for it to be scary and for it to get you, right? It's not like, oh, gotcha, that was a good jump scare there, right? It was a good little scary scare there, right? Again, no, it's more so like so you can understand what Sunny's going through, bud. And that's for Omori. And I can even get into Security Breach, right? because I think we're far enough past Security Breach. Granted, once a year rolls around, I assume people will make even more videos shitting on Security Breach, but again, we're past the point to where people are saying like, oh, game, Steel Wool bad, Coughing good, right? So we're past that point of Security Breach criticism. But again, I think the best example in Security Breach is probably, again, the fucking, the daycare sequence, right? Where you're fixing, grant, I don't know why there are fucking generators in the daycare, but I also don't know why, there's fucking Remnant in the game. So the books fucking introduce that shit, but something where, again, you're going around in the dark with the fucking, sun, moon, not even really chasing you. Like, they're just fucking, like, moving around, right? They're moving patterns, like, really awkward, but again, moving around, right? Kind of, again, you're not only in the dark, but you're going through the fucking, like, maze of tunnels, right? And then it's kind of hilarious, because this goes back to just terrible Security Breach criticism, where, like, I got into an argument with some person, because I said that was probably the scariest part of the game, and they're like, oh, just, that's only scary because it's, like, dark and you're being chased. Like, they said that as if that's not what all the fucking games are, and what, like, 90% of horror games are about, right? Like, name a horror game where you're not in a dark, like, setting and being chased by something. Like, I mean, come on, let's be real here. Like, I don't know, but that's getting off topic. But the point being, that's a good example of it there, right? Where you build into, because obviously the jump scare itself isn't even that fucking scary, right? It's, the dude looks like a fucking doll, right? Looks like a fucking, not animal, because it's sun moon, but it looks like a fucking, machine, right? But again, in and of itself doesn't look scary. The only, I guess, quote unquote scary, like, I guess things from FNAF would be like, maybe like the nightmare animatronics, but other than that, like, nothing really like looks scary. It's like, I mean, you don't, like, even the fucking DJ Music Man from that game, right? It's not scary, it's just big as fuck. So, but what it comes down to is, again, it's that build up into it, and sort of, again, because granted, I played through it however many times I got, I think, jump scared like 2 or 3 times, and then I just mapped out a route. But something to where, like, again, when you do go through it, right? If you would just go through it and never get caught, right? Then it's like, okay, you're not, it's not even really that scary. There's no horror because there's no execution. There's no follow through, right? You're just, with that being the case, you're just moving around in, dark tunnel, right? Turning on generators. There's nothing out there that gets you if you get through it. But obviously, if you get jump scared, then it's like, okay, the threat that's lurking, right? So it's very similar to what am I thinking of there? There's, I don't know. I'm thinking of something that this is relating to, but I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. But at least in terms of that, right? That's what that comes down to, right? So it's about that build up and transition, right? If it's not there, then but again, what else? But that's kind of the point, right? Is that it's kind of funny, because the original sort of, and it's funny, right? Because I think this is also more an issue with FNAF specifically, and FNAF fans, like the fan base, the community, as well as just more modern indie horror. I think the issue is indie horror, when it was kind of its original, like, differentiator, or its original sort of ticket to fame or, like, glory, was that, oh, it didn't rely on, like, cheap, shitty jump scares, to get you, right? It relied more on, kind of, again, the feelings that creates you, right? And then now right? And then now we've kind of gone full circle with, like, at least, again, how I kind of view, like, the whole FNAF Plus and Juniors thing, is that now they're doing over-the-top, shitty, like, fucking scary, like, animations, again, and to get you there, as opposed to, like, what the original indie horror, like, ticket or claim to fame, which was that it didn't need that. I mean, even in the original FNAF game, the animatronics, they weren't even that scary. Again, it's just because Scott was shitty at making models. That was literally the whole fucking, motivation there. But again, it's almost a 180, but, fucking, not 180, but a 360, right? But again, but beyond that, something to where it's like, now I'm getting off topic, but the whole point being that indie horror, what makes it indie horror is that it's not about the horror, right? Or at least it's not primarily about the horror. That's not the focal point, right? That's not, again, right, what the emphasis or focus on. It can be supplementary. It could be something that's built into, or that is built up into, right? again, that's my examples of Omori and FNAF there. But never in and of itself is it the focal point, like prioritization, like focus there. As, you know, again, then you take away from its ticket to fame, claim to fame, right? And then it's like, okay, well, how is this different from AR horror? Again, I just think that's something people don't realize. That's part of my whole issue and deal with the fucking indie genre and indie horror community and fan base specifically, where they're very much just, you know, kind of stuck up, full of themselves, and act like snobbish. Again, my main criticism is that, you know, the indie genre is the only genre of game where you don't play to enjoy it, right? You play to pick it apart and analyze it so you can feel superior to everyone else. But again, maybe that's right? That's a bit too harsh. But again, I don't even really think I'm getting way off topic here. But I went over what I want to, so I don't think I really have anything else for this. Yeah, went over Omori, again, indie horror, kind of compared it with FNAF, like kind of use those two as examples of, okay, here's what indie horror should be. This is what it is, and this is what differentiates it from everything else. And if you stray from that, right, again, that's what, but who knows, I'll play Juniors in like a few days, right? Well, maybe not a few days, more like a week. Plus still isn't out yet. I don't know what's happening with that, but again, right, you know, who knows? We'll see. Once it does, maybe I'll play. But it's literally just a FNAF 1 remake, so it's not as important. Junior seems more interesting there, but beyond that, who knows? We'll see, right, what happens. And then if not, if I do, I'll make a video on it. But that, I don't really have anything else to say for this. So, yep, that's it for this one. See you in the next one.